Hi, and welcome to A Victorious Life, an outreach teaching ministry of the Shiloh Holiness Church. I'm your host, Lori Stimson Ortega, and as always, we want to say thank you for allowing us to come into your home by way of VPN Ministries, or VPN Networks, excuse me. We are excited about what the Lord is doing. Now, I don't want you to turn the channel because I had this same shirt on last week, but this is, incidentally, it is part 2. We tape back-to-back segments. So if you are tuning in, don't let the Holiness is Right shirt, don't say, oh, I saw that last week, and go to Colombo or go to well, it's not Sunday night football, or football season hasn't started yet. But don't change the channel. This is part 2. On last week, we talked about addressing personal ambition. And per the cameraman, we went way over. So some of that he had to edit out. And I do want to say this, those of you that are contemplating starting a television ministry, we encourage you to give VPN the first opportunity to do so. You would be surprised how many people this small network or this seemingly small station really reaches. You know, for my job, I traveled throughout a 40-county radius for different meetings and different events. And, you know, I was in Gladewater. And somebody came up and they said, you know, I was at a church well, actually I was walking to a meeting and they said, you look very familiar. And you know, when I was first on television, I got a kick out of that. And the first thing that I would say is, maybe you saw me on like television? And they would say, no. So I stopped that because, you know, again, we talked about personal ambition and all of that kind of stuff. I realized don't leave no space for the enemy. You get caught up in who's watching the show, who's not watching the show, when you lose, in essence, you know, what you're trying to do. So let me come clean about that. I did used to be that way. I did used to want to know who's watching the show, who's not watching the show. But then I reached a point where it's like, you know what, Lord, look, I'm in your will. At this point in my life, this is what you have planned. May not always be on television. Okay. But at this moment, I'm going to give it 100% for your glory and for your honor, and whoever by chance is watching, they are watching. You know, I'm not going to cease. You know, I'm not going to do it looking at, how many viewers do I have here? How many viewers? We just doing what the Lord has called us to do. But what I have noticed is that broadcasting on VPN Ministries, it has been a blessing. And I do want to say this: anytime I endorse somebody or put a plug in, trust and believe they're not giving me any type of financial compensation to do so. We support what we wholeheartedly believe in. So I don't want you to think that the people whose names that I'm calling, that they are paid sponsors. While I would love some sponsors for the show right now, that you know, we get a few little donations for different projects that we are undertaking, which remind me to tell you about the GoFundMe account for a ex-offender re-entry program for East Texas. That's one of our goals. We're shooting for 2017, and it's going to happen. You know, and when it happens, Tyler, it's going to be amazing. It's going to be astounding. Y'all are going to sit back and wonder, how in the world did that little old bitty girl get access to that? It's going to be amazing. And I wish I had Muhammad Ali's words right about now, because he was the best showman. He'd have you thinking, you know, it's going to be, you know, and it's going down in Manila. So it's going down in Tyler, Texas. But we do encourage you. I feel really led to say this. There are some of you that started television ministries, and you know, because of finances you have to walk away from it, or you started and because of the equipment and all those things you're like, well, I'm not reaching people. I want you to reconsider that, because these are the last days and we've got to get the message of Christ out however we can get it, in television and by way of technology, internet, cell phones, smartphones, etc. That is how we are taking the gospel to the world. Do you realize that the YouTube channel on the website, I get an email. Every time somebody signs up for the newsletter, it sends an email that lets me know every time somebody goes onto the website and they read about the history, they read about what we're doing for the Lord, and they sign up or subscribe to the newsletter. That's another opportunity for us to share the life-changing gospel of Jesus Christ with somebody we may never physically meet. So we want to encourage you if you are considering coming on television, please contact VPN Ministries. Now, if you need video services, now my personal I have a personal cameraman. Okay, I have a personal creative director that I will be more than happy to shop around, or shop around or shop out. I need to clarify that. He's not my personal cameraman. I use KD's video service, and it'll appear at the bottom of your screen. For those of you who say, you know what, it's hard for me to go into the station to tape, and I want to get into social media, please contact KD's video service. Leave a message. Very professional. He's not coming out there with a handheld camcorder. He's not using his cell phone to tape you. He's not, it's very professional. It's the same quality that you see by the different news programs. It's a high quality picture, high quality camera. So if you are contemplating going on television, then why don't we do this? Why don't we contact KD's video services first so that they can tape? You can get about 5 or 6 segments. You can do a package deal or ongoing if your church wants to video enough material. So if you say, you know what, we're going to try this for a month or 2 months, we're going to, or really, I think 3 months is enough for you to gauge whether or not television it works for you, if it's compatible with what the Lord has instructed the ministry that He has entrusted to you to do by way of the vision for, again, your ministry or what have you. But 3 months is enough time to say, okay, you know what, for this first 3 months, we're going to get these services videoed, and we're going to have them edited. We're going to do them professionally, and once we take a look at them, we'll say, yeah, we're ready to move forward. Then we're going to take those 3 months, we'll say those, what is that, about 12 Sundays or Wednesday night Bible studies worth of sermons and or studies, and we're going to go to VPN, and we're going to say, hey, can we have 3 months worth of videos. Let's try this for 3 or 6 months. And you know what happens? Everybody wins, because you didn't rush in, like that saying goes, fools rush in where angels fear to tread. You paced yourself. You did it. You got it together. You sought the Lord. The Lord said, yes, I am with you. You called KD's video services, and they did a professional job. And then you took it and you talked to VP and Violet Peer at VPN Ministries, and you discussed the best time slot. And you know what? So when your church, the ministry, or, as an individual, when it was presented professionally, and it wasn't haphazardly. You didn't have one tape this week and then, well, I can't. Well, no, we're not going to be able to do it. It was done professionally. All right. So you know what, Mr. Cameraman, I need to go on and walk in the plan God has for my life. Now, we were on last week talking about addressing personal ambition, and we're going to pick up with Philippians chapter 2, verses 3 through 9. On last week, we used 2 Chronicles, I believe, chapter 1, verses 11 and 12. And all of this is going to tie together because we're talking about keep growing. Now, I do feel led to say this. Every year, Mr. Cameraman, every year, our people will stop me and they'll say, when are you going to start the Park Bible Study? I start the Park Bible Study, and I don't see anybody that ever asked me about it, and sending me text and sending me messenger things and poking me and all that kind of stuff. So I don't see those people. Then when I say I'm going to start a new Bible study, everybody says, I think I'm going to come out there, and they ask for the notes and the scriptures and all that stuff, and I send the stuff that, like what we're going to talk about, just not the full outline, just the 8-week for each different session. And those people are nowhere to be found. Well, I want to say this. Because God told us to take on the mindset of Jesus, then I know he's long suffering. So I'm going to be long suffering with you. I'm going to give you one more chance to come out to Bible study starting this fall, September 12th. The regular Bible study, we're not going to be in the park again. That's in the summer. We're going to be at the 411 West Front Street location. And we're going to just teach a simple little Bible study, and we're going to keep growing. That's the title of it. And you know what? I think I'm going to kind of let you wonder what we're going to talk about, try to build anticipation during the month of August, because after the park, now that the park Bible study has ended, we are transitioning so that we can get our notes, the PowerPoints, and the materials, that we're using, etc. So I want to say that. So tying all of that into personal ambition and keeping ourselves where we're constantly growing, we're going to pick back up with Philippians chapter 2, verses 3 and 9, where we read last week, verse number 3 says, "Let nothing be done through selfish ambition or conceit, but in lowliness of mind, let each esteem others better than himself. Now, on last week, this tied in with personal ambition, because what the Lord doesn't want us to just do things haphazardly. Okay, he doesn't want us to do them for selfish ambition or for selfish gain. He doesn't want us to do some things that are just going to benefit us when it comes to reaching people for the kingdom and for him working in us and through us, because Christ doesn't work in a selfish attitude or from a selfish mentality. When he uses us to do things, he uses us so that other people can see what he's doing and how he's working in our lives, and they can be drawn to him, drawn to us, but really they're being drawn to him, because when they come and ask us, how are you able to do this? I don't know if I can get through this. I don't know if this is something that I can endure. The Christ in us is going to share him as the solution to their problem. So he's saying in Philippians chapter, the writer is saying, Paul is writing to the Philippian church. He's saying, don't do anything through selfish ambition or through conceit. Conceit being arrogance, but he says do it in lowliness of mind. And now this is something I do want to address. This scripture in Philippians chapter 2, verse number 3, has been misinterpreted throughout Christendom. Okay, if I can say that. We are not to, when it says in lowliness of mind, let each esteem others better than himself. It's not telling them to put other people on a pedestal higher than yourself. It's not saying that. What it's saying is, it's saying for you to treat people basically the way you want to be treated. Meaning, before you came to Christ, you didn't have it together. Okay? Before you came to Christ, you were just like the hamster on the hamster wheel, just running. Okay? Before you came to Christ, maybe you had a problem with drugs and alcohol. Maybe you were promiscuous. Maybe you were a thief. Maybe you were a liar. Maybe you were an adulterer. Maybe you were a murderer or whatever. Maybe you had some of this, you had traits that nobody could see. Maybe you were envious. Maybe you were conceited. Maybe you were jealous or operated in lasciviousness. What that verse is saying is, once the Lord has saved you and set you free, do not allow yourself to look down on the person that's still in that situation, because you are just a sinner that has been saved by grace. God extended compassion and mercy towards you, in that the book of Romans says, for all have sinned and come short of the glory of God. So that verse is saying to us, don't forget it. Don't think just because you are walking in holiness now, or you are walking upright and you're in right standing with the Lord, and He's forgiven you, and you've made straight paths for your feet. He's saying, don't think that you're better off than that person. No, we're the only reason we are in the situation that we are in is because of Christ. Believe it or not, it is our charge and our challenge to lift that person up by introducing them to the life-changing power of Jesus Christ. So we want to make sure that we understand verse number 3. It's not for you to just, well, no, I can't. No, I'm the lowest. I'm the worst of all of these people. No. Jesus said, whom the Son has set free, he is free indeed. Okay? That means no questions, no ands, no ifs or ors about it. We have been made free. So because we're free, that means every aspect of ourselves, our lives should be free. So we want you to understand that doesn't mean that you're lower than anybody. It just means that when it comes to reaching people for Christ, when it comes to interacting with people who don't have it all together, you have to esteem yourself, lower, like it says, but in lowliness of mind, let each esteem others better than himself. That's when you see somebody again who has not accepted Christ, and you see their condition through spiritual eyes, and you connect with them, and you remember, you walk down memory lane and you remember, you know what, if it wasn't for the Lord, if it wasn't for salvation, I would be in that situation. And because I would still be in that situation, because you were once in that situation, you need to humble yourself and go to that person and say, you know what, let me tell you how I used to be in this situation. Let me tell you what I did to get out of this. Let me tell you what made my life better. Let me tell you how I was able to overcome what you're struggling and what you're facing. So we want to make sure we understand that verse. Verse 4 says, let each of you look out not only for his own interest, but also for the interests of others. And I'm reading the NKJV Bible from the notes that we pass out from the Park Bible Study. Now, this is when it says, let each of you look out not only for his own interest. This again ties into personal ambition, but it also ties into the lesson we're going to try to get to on today about behavior. We can't just, there comes a point, you can't just be satisfied just looking out for yourself. Okay, there comes a point where when your pantry is full, if you're getting rid of food because it's freezer burn or the expiration date is catching up with you on canned goods, and that is a long process, then you either need to become a better steward of what the Lord is blessing you with and buy only what you need, or if you buy above and beyond what you need, then give it to somebody else. When you're at the grocery store, that's like Mr. Cameraman, I will admit, Sam's messes it up for me every single time. I will go out there, and my husband told me, Lori, why do we have 4 different types of bread? You bought butter bread, wheat bread, croissants, and biscuits, okay? And tortillas. You've got 5 different types of bread, and bread doesn't last that long. So you know what? I had to become a better steward. Now, when I start throwing away half a loaf of bread that was green, I had to say, this, Lord, I'm sorry. I hate throwing away food, especially food that was not eaten because there was other food there. While some people may say that's a blessing, there's somebody, I know what it's like to be hungry. And I know what it's like to just, Lord, give me, if I had a piece of bread. So I'm mindful of that. So now if I realize, wait a minute, we've got 2 loaves of bread in here, I'll call somebody. Hey, do y'all need some bread? Or if I see a good deal, if they have, like sometimes the local grocery store will have 2 bags of potatoes, 2 5-pound bags of potatoes for $5. That's a good deal. We're not eating potatoes like, 2 10-pound bags of potatoes. We're not eating them that fast. So I'll buy the 2 for $5 because that's a good deal. And then I'll walk across the street to my neighbor's house or find some seniors and say, hey, you know what? I've got an extra bag of potatoes. One time, Mr. Cameraman, the Lord blessed me so much with fresh vegetables. He blessed me with green beans, squash, and zucchini, and onions, and plums, and all those things. You know what I did? I had so much that I called all the senior citizens that I knew, and I split it up, and I made them bags, and I delivered them bags of fresh fruit, because senior citizens, they need to eat fresh food per se. So that's what I'm saying. He's saying don't just look out just for your own interest. Well, my family is full and we feeling good, and the people next door, you know, they hungry. You can see the little kids when you pull up and they see you out there barbecuing, and they standing on the fence like this. They're not mesmerized by smoke. They smell meat. You know, so again, but also for the interest of others. It's okay as believers in Christ. And really, if the Lord's not convicting your heart to help other people in whatever way, shape, form, or fashion he sees fit to do it, then, you know, that means maybe you don't have that compassion that you need. Verse number 5 says, we hear this quoted, and y'all are all over the churches when we say this. Verse number 5 of Philippians 2 says, let this mind be in you, which was also in Christ Jesus. Okay, verse number 6, who being in the form of God did not consider it robbery to be equal with God, but made himself of no reputation, taking the form of a bondservant and coming in the likeness of men. Now, I know, Mr. Cameraman, you may have to edit this part out. I hope you don't, but if you do and I don't see it on there, it is what it is. Can't miss what you don't have. But I've always struggled with this scripture, verse number 7, where it says, but made himself of no reputation. Because sometimes, you know, as a serving in a leadership capacity or leadership role at our church, the church that my father or my parents founded, and then being able to be invited to different speaking engagements, you know, I've always been kind of reluctant, and people who know me now, y'all know why I don't do it, because it may not be y'all, it may just be me. Whenever you go to a service, whether it's a funeral or what have you, sometimes from the pulpit, if you're just sitting in the audience and they say, would all our pastors and ministers, if you are a pastor, you are a minister, and will you please stand? You know, I have issues with that. Does that sound crazy? I have issues with that. And again, it may just be me. And the reason that I have issues with it is because of this very scripture. You know, sometimes if we're not careful, we'll seek to have a reputation of being God's man or God's woman, and we won't have the works that warrant the title. Everybody's not a man of God. Everybody's not a woman of God. Just because they call themselves reverend, elder, prophet, prophetess, deacon, bishop, I mean that God is ordaining them, that God has ordained them. They may have been ordained formally by the process of, whatever denomination or organization they're in. But that doesn't mean that God has ordained the ministry. Because sometimes if you're not careful, you'll see a lot of these people walking in lifestyles. No, you're not a man of God. No, you're not a woman of God. If you're out here, you're getting drunk and high, you need to be delivered. I'm not going to call you a man of God or a woman of God. And again, I'm not here to belittle anybody, or I'm not here to pick a fight. I'm not here to do that. But I'm saying if we're not careful, we'll like how it sounds when people call us, ooh, woman of God, ooh, man of God. Do you have the works that are certifying that? Has God certified you as that individual? Because we were taught, Mr. Cameron, I'm sure you can attest to this. Back in the day, if you called a man or a woman, if you said this is the man of God, their prophecies were on point. It didn't take no years and years and years for stuff. If they prayed for you, you felt the effects of the prayer. They were not very popular people. You didn't find them at all they weren't at pack of pews and 100 folk in red and 25 in blue. They weren't wasting time at stuff like that. They were reading. They looked different. They sounded different. They conducted their lives differently. So when it said they weren't concerned about their reputation, they were concerned about, do you know Jesus? Do you have a relationship with him? What more must he do to show you that he's concerned about you, that he loves you? So that's what I'm saying. Sometimes when we go different places and they'll say that and I don't stand up, then the people are looking like, why you didn't stand? What is that going to bring? What is that going to bring? If you know who you are and you know what God has called you, it don't matter. People like the girl told Peter, she said when he was saying, she said, hey, don't you was with him too. She said, nah. He said, your speech. She said, no, I can tell by the way you talk. Our speech will betray us. Our actions. What does the verse say? What does the scripture say? They'll know us by our love. They'll know you by the works that you do. But all these people that are running around and call me by my title. You better call me this or you better call me that. For what? Jesus, they were not running around calling Jesus the Son of God. Only people that knew who he was his inner circle. You remember when Jesus said, hey, he asked his people, the 12, who do men say that I am? He was basically saying, who are they saying that I am? And they said, some say Elijah. They didn't answer. When they said some say, he was asking them, okay, well, people are saying, then he flipped the script on it and said, who do you say that I am? When people ask you what Peter said, I say thou art the Son of God. And he said, you know what? Blessed art thou, Simon Bar-Jonah, for flesh and blood didn't reveal that to you. So if Jesus was running around here and people was just calling him Jesus, we might ought to be satisfied. If they don't call you elect lady, first lady, and I've never understood that either. But and then I know they're gonna be upset about that. But elect lady, first lady, angel of this house, all that kind of stuff, no. If they just call Jesus, Jesus, we might ought to be satisfied with them just calling us brother or sister. Sister Lori, hey, that's what they call when I go to prison or whatever. They say, well, hey, they're not co-pastor, assistant pastor Ortega, and God's woman for the. They're not saying that because you know what? I school them in the back. I'm like, look, we got some people we may have some people out here that have never been to church before. We may have some people that don't understand protocol. They don't understand the formalities. So it's not going to bother me if you just say, hey, Sister Lori is coming or Sister Ortega is coming and she's going to share with us what the Lord has given. That's fine with me. Okay, you don't have to read my resume. You don't have to do all that. Why? Because look at what Jesus, if we take on the mind of Christ and put on the mind of Christ, look at what it said. He was the Son of God. He knew who he was. He didn't take on, and like it says, he didn't consider it robbery to be equal with God, but he took on no reputation. He's like, look, my name is Jesus. I'm from Nazareth. I was born in Bethlehem. Where are you from? My name Jesus. Who you hanging with? Peter, Paul, Peter, John, Matthew, Andrew. Yeah. Anyway, that's a whole nother lesson right there. And coming in the likeness of men, verse number 8, and being found in appearance as a man, here's the $100,000 word. He humbled himself and became obedient to the point of death, even the death of the cross. Therefore, verse 9, God also has highly exalted him and given him the name which is above every name. Isn't that amazing, Mr. Cameraman? That because he came with no reputation and he humbled himself to the authority of God, meaning the will of God, the plan of God, the directives of God, the instructions of God. He didn't get caught up with what they're going to call me. How they gonna come at me? They need to respect me. He didn't come at them like that. Look at what God did. Because he walked in obedience, God exalted him. I think that's amazing. That just by his name, that his name alone is above every name. And you know what? Sometimes if we're not careful, we're not going to want to go the way of the cross. And the way of the cross isn't just being up there crucifying stuff, but the way of the cross means there are some attributes about our character and our behavior that we need to address. And that's why we're going to take a look at this week on David. Last week we looked at Solomon, how he, went about with for personal ambition. I think we did an okay job with that. If you have any questions or you want the transcript, I'll be happy to email it to you for either lesson. But this week we're going to take a look at one of my favorite people, which is David. But I want you to understand some things about David that sometimes you forget. Aside from the 5 smooth stones and killing the giant and fighting and all of, there are some things that we've got to realize about him. And just as we said with Solomon, David was known for his looks. He was known for his courage. He was known for his bravery. He was known even for his music and the book. The Psalms, those songs and poetry and all those things. But when we talk about behavior, I found this quote that I thought was interesting. It says, we change other people's behavior by first changing our own. And I put a none because I don't know who wrote that. But growing up, we would hear your parents, before you got out the car or before they went in somewhere, they tell you, be on your best behavior. They tell you you need to behave. Now, what were they saying to you? They were basically saying to you, you know what my expectations are. That's all they were saying. And they were telling you, let your actions meet my expectations. Don't let what other people are doing dictate how you behave, because I don't expect that from anybody else. I'm expecting you to carry yourself in a manner that is appropriate for that particular situation. So when we talk about behavior and we talk about David and we take a look at that quote, you can't change anybody's behavior until you change your own. And part of changing your own is understanding where those shortcomings are, or those shortfalls are. Sometimes we have behaviors that we can't see, even as believers in Christ, that we can't see, that are projecting and radiating out, and we don't see that. And are they sinful? No, they're not. They may not be sinful behaviors, but they have the potential to stop you from growing and lead you down areas and avenues that could turn into sinful actions. Now, one of the things that I say all the time, I used to say this a lot when I first started teaching. I used to tell people, I can't change your behavior. Okay, and I say this, we can't change people's behaviors. We can only make them aware of our expectation. Okay, and that's usually when we have meetings. When I'm at work, I make it a point to anytime I have a meeting, if I'm conducting a meeting, I make it a point to come prepared for the meeting. So if I've sent you a meeting request, trust and believe, I have an agenda that I printed out. I email you either the day of, in the morning, depending on when the meeting is. If the meeting is in the afternoon, the day before, I'm emailing you an agenda, so you'll know exactly what we're going to talk about. And people used to laugh. They'd say, well, why do you do that? That's not that. Oh, you didn't have to do that. People that have worked with me in the past, they're like, you didn't have to do that. Yes, in my mind, I'm like, yes, I did. So you'll know what my expectations are, because I can't control your behavior. I can't change your behavior. And what usually happens is when you understand you can't change people's behaviors, you can only let them know what your expectations are, then you're able to teach that person some lessons that he or she about themselves that he or she may have not been aware of. By doing the agenda in all my years of working, by doing an agenda for a meeting, you know what has been able to happen? Other people will, if they don't send an agenda, while we're there, they'll start taking notes, and they'll email the notes, or they'll say, hey, is this what you're saying that you're needing? Or is this what you're saying that we're going to do? And that way, they know your expectations, so that if you show up and to one of their meetings and they have an agenda, it's like, hey, we're going to keep it moving. So again, when we're looking at addressing behavior, the definition for behavior through the Merriam-Webster dictionary is the manner in which one acts or behaves. That's a simple one. The action or reaction of a person or animal in response to a seen or unforeseen stimulus. That's really the definition, that second part that I want us to understand. You know, we were raised as a family to be proactive and less reactive. Reactive means you're unprepared. You know people are going to die. That's the part now, so you know it's going to happen. But when people die, if they die suddenly, you don't want to be reactive. What? Oh, no. Now, I'm not here to tell you not to scream and holler. That depends on, your personality or your emotional state at the time. But proactive people typically are in control of their emotions. Proactive people, when death slips up on them, they took a proactive approach. How? They had life insurance. Okay? That's being proactive. Because a lot of times when people die unexpectedly and people are yelling and screaming, they're missing their loved ones. But pretty soon anger is going to set in because they didn't have insurance. So when you think about behavior is the action or reaction of a person or animal in response to a seen or unforeseen stimulus. Now, therein opens up another question as to what is a stimulus. Stimulus is something that triggers an action, and it can be mental or it can be physical. So now let's take a look at addressing behaviors. And I hope the cameraman can keep me abreast of the time so I won't get caught up on Terry on one scripture too long. But in 2 Samuel chapter 12, we're going to look at verses 1 all the way through verses 7, really. Okay? And I'm going to paraphrase, if that's okay, because what happens in this story is David in 2 Samuel chapter 12, David is now king. David is not running and hollering and dancing and praising the Lord for his projected or expected end. He's where God has told him he would be. He is in fact the sole king. All right, he's the king, and he's got other people. He has been established. He's in his castle or his yurt or his domain or what have you. He's ruling, and because he's the king now, nobody's trying to get his throne. So he's operating in somewhat of a relaxed state. He's walking in now part of the plan that God has for his life. That part being, as long as we're alive and we're believing God and trusting God, we need to realize this life is a process. He puts us where he wants us to be for a season and for a reason. Some seasons and reasons outlast other people's seasons and reasons. But anyway, David is there, and while they are at war and the other folk are out there fighting, on this particular day, David goes out on the top of his roof and he decides to just, I guess, meditate. I don't know what he was doing. He may have been just enjoying the scenery, or hey, I'll go look outside. Okay, because it's hard to, if you've always been a fighter, and that's why we have to pray for our soldiers that return, because the longer they stay out there doing those different tours and they see all of that violence and they see all of that death and bedlam and mayhem, when they come back, it's hard to get that programmed out of them. That's going to take some time. So David is out there, and all of a sudden, who's out there taking a bath? We call her Bathsheba, but you pronounce it Bathsheba. So Bathsheba is out there, and she's taking a bath, and David says, okay, you know what? Who is that? He starts inquiring. Because if you're taking a bath, that means you're not going to have clothes on, because this wasn't like in the Old West where you just got to dump in the water once every 3 weeks or what have you with your clothes on because you were traveling. But she's taking this bath, and she's in the privacy of her own home. I guess she's on her roof too. And he inquires, and then not only does he inquire, but he summons her, and she comes to him. And as Paul Harvey would say, the rest is history. Okay? And lo and behold, she's now with child. Well, let me fill you in on some facts that I didn't share with you. First of all, she was a married woman. Okay? And her husband Uriah was in David's army. He was a soldier in his army. So when David finds out that Bathsheba is expecting, he calls for her husband. Now, me personally, the Park Bible Study group, this was a very boisterous group this year, and we had a very good study interacting with this and comments. I said, now, me personally, I don't think that was a one-time situation. All right, that's just me. Because you know what? Sin is comfortable. Sometimes people do it the first time, they don't get caught. They do it the second time, they don't get caught. The third time they do it, they don't get caught. Fourth time they do it, they get caught. But then no, that ain't me. You know, so me personally, I think this was something probably ongoing. And then you know what? And then she got caught, or they got caught because she's expecting. And David calls her husband because he's going to sort this out on his own. And in the calling of her husband, he gets the man drunk and he says, you know what? You need to go home. You've been fighting. You need to go home to your beautiful wife. She's expecting you. Well, the man, instead of him going home, he says, I need to protect the king. So he spends the night on the outside, we'll say, of the castle. And his wife is still pregnant by another man. Now, let's just stop right there and look at David. We didn't know that. We didn't see that side of him when he was like, I'll fight. Who is he talking about? Our God. He can't talk about my God like that. When he was facing his giant, we only thought his giant was Goliath. But it's obvious one of his giants that we couldn't see, he had a problem with the women. Okay? And if we're not careful, we'll just focus on the things about ourselves that people can see. We'll try to focus on, now me personally, you know, and you know, we don't have the same body that we had when we were in our 20s and our 30s. We're almost 50 years old. So what do? Women, we know we do this well. We start camouflaging. We learn what our best assets are, and we play up those assets. So if you know that, you know, if an outfit, a certain cut of an outfit makes you look heavier, when you reach your 40s, you already know your body. So you're like, no, I'm not going to even waste time trying to try that on. Can I have an A-line where it looks like a tent? I'd like that tent cut, because the tent cut is going to flatter from here up. So nobody's going to be focusing on from there down. Okay, so we learn how to cover up the outward flaws. But this is an indication. Why didn't when David saw the woman out there, when he looked and he's knowing, wait a minute, okay, well, that's a beautiful woman. He should have turned around, knowing how he was. He should have turned around and walked away and repented. Lord, I'm sorry. Could he get the image out of his mind? I'm sure he couldn't get the image out of his mind. But when he started asking questions as to who she was, and they told him, that's Uriah's wife, he should have been like, okay, well, you know what? So much for that. Who else is in the neighborhood? David should have said, you know what? I need to change my room. Can y'all move my room on the other side? I need to just face the rising sun. I need to face when the sun comes up. I just want to look over the beach. I don't want no houses in front of me. That's what he should have done. He should have done whatever it took to go in the opposite direction of where the enemy would lead him. Now, Was it wrong for him to look at her? It was wrong. But he didn't know that she was married at the time. I'm not condoning what he did by looking at her. We know that women were made for men. We know that men are attracted to women. If they're not attracted to women, something is definitely wrong. All right? We're not going to get into that. But when he saw her, and if he knew that he had a problem with that, he should have turned and went the other way. Why do I say that was a giant that we didn't see? When I come against you with the power of God, and on this day you're going to be delivered in my hand. Why didn't we see that? Because lust is something you can't see. You know, envy isn't obvious. You know, greed initially isn't obvious to the naked eye. Those are internal things. Now, how do we know that why do I say David had a problem with this? Well, we got the first indication. Remember when he wanted, I think it was, when he was fighting, he and his men, and they went to this man's, I want to say it was Nabal. They went to him, and I could be wrong about the name of the man, and I apologize for that. I'm going to do better with that. But he went, I do remember his wife's name was Abigail, and she was attractive. And you remember the man, David said, hey, can you feed us? And the man said, no, he had a lot. He said, no, I can't feed you. Get your own. I'm paraphrasing. And the man died that night. And you remember the wife she told him, she said, hey, look, you can't tell him that. And David said, okay, look, if you're going to do that, then tomorrow this going to go down. We're going to come back. It's too late for us to come in there and kill you. We're going to come back tomorrow and handle up a deal with you. So what did she do? Abigail went out there and she said, well, hey, wait a minute. I'm sorry. I want to apologize for my husband. He doesn't know. And she gave him food and gave him whatever it is that they wanted. And you know what? When the man died in the night, guess who was on the back of David's horse the next day that he took as his wife? Her. Now, if that's not the first indication that there's a problem. So when you saw her, oh, she's attractive. Oh, she's pretty. He didn't go there looking for a wife. You know what I'm saying? You went there for provisions so that you can continue moving. But you ended up with the wife. And there was nothing wrong with that because her husband had died. But you was married to her. So now you're married to her. And now you're over here looking at somebody else. So when Uriah didn't go home, David then calls him back in and he writes a letter to, I believe, Joab, to the captain of the guard. And he says, hey, you know what? I want you to put him in the thick of the battle. I want you to put him where he's going to lose his life. Well, they do exactly what the king says. And does Uriah die? Yes, he loses his life, and I'm pretty sure he was given a hero's burial, a hero's funeral. And then David then turns around and marries the man's wife, okay, because technically she was still his wife, because while he, until he died on the battlefield, and after that, she marries David, and they think they've set up shop like they're just any other married couple that is now expecting a child. And so given the dynamics of that, the prophet Nathan shows up on the scene, and he begins to tell David, he says, you know what, I want to tell you this story. He says there was a man who had a lamb, and this lamb was like a family member, and this lamb, it was not just one of their farm animals. It was like a family pet. It was almost like one of his biological kids. He said, but you know what happened? One time a traveler came to town, and the traveler went to this rich man, and he was visiting this rich man. But what the rich man did, he had so many of his own flock. Okay, he didn't just have a singular lamb. He had a flock. So instead of him using one of his, taken from many, to provide the meal, he went to that man and he got that man's little lamb, and he killed that lamb, and they ate that. They had lamb chops for dinner. And he's saying to him, he said that he did that with no remorse. He did that. He didn't think about, I can't do this because it's not mine. He did that. He didn't have any second thoughts about it. And he said, Nathan says this to David. And guess what David does? David says in verse number 5, he says, David got angry. And David says, got mad with the man. And he said, even though this was just a story, remember, he said to Nathan, he says, as the Lord liveth, you know, whoever did this to the man, I'm gonna get them. You know, basically he's saying, not only am I going to avenge that lamb, but meaning I'm gonna avenge that man, because of that lamb, I'm gonna do it fourfold. That means they're gonna get it way worse. They're gonna have it way worse than they would than the man just taking the lamb. Because David was sitting there thinking that Nathan was talking about tangible goods and services. What he was talking about what he was addressing was David's behavior. Because remember, there was that, like we're saying, there was that side of him that you couldn't see. So Nathan went and addressed the behavior. Now, with our last 5 minutes, let's talk about last 4 minutes, Let's turn this into the life application. Number 1, God always makes us aware of our behavior through others. Who did God send? God sent Nathan. Because David had reached a point where he didn't see himself. So God sent Nathan to make him aware of his character, of his shortcoming, of his shortfall, so that he could get back in line and so that he could see himself and that he could address that particular behavior. Number 2, God always ushers in a comparison of our behavior. Remember, with this example, we had man with one lamb, man with a flock. God always shows us the good and the bad. He always gives us an example so that we can compare. He's not doing apples and oranges. He's doing a green apple with a red apple. Okay? A yellow apple with a green apple. He's showing you a comparison because he wants us to understand our behavior. The third thing is he makes our behavior personal and unique to us. When God shows up, when we pray that prayer, Lord, show me. He's not going to be concerned about helping you sort out somebody else's dilemma or situation. And yours is messed up. He's not going to help you to help them first. You've got to be empty. You've got to empty yourself out before him daily. That's why you got to pray those prayers. Lord, look, if I've said anything, if I've done anything that is contrary to your word, Lord, if there's anything about me that I need to be made aware of, Lord, help me see myself. And you know what? I'm not here to just say that y'all need to do that. I have to do that every day, because that's a part of growing. You know what? And the Lord has revealed some things to me about, we'll say I'm impatient. The Lord has to help me with that. And I'm not pretending. I'm trying to keep it real. I'm impatient. And he has to help me by doing what? I have to realize he's teaching me patience in some of those situations. And that's unique to me. That's a character trait that is unique to me that I have to work on. And he shows me my behavior of impatience. Okay, if that makes any sense to you. Verse 5, there are always consequences associated with negative behavior. That's self-explanatory. And number 6, we must take ownership and personal accountability. And you know what? The reason, number 1, God always makes us aware of our behavior through others. The reason he did that is because had God not addressed David's behavior, David ran the risk of going in the same direction and the same path as Saul, because David was king and he was making some decisions that were going contrary to the Lord. He was making some decisions and his actions were showing or about to display that, you know what, God's not going to stay with you if you continue to do that. And so when we think about addressing our personal ambition and addressing our behavior, we now see, and talking about Solomon on last week, now we know why Solomon loved the women, because perhaps that was a part of his his father's character. And some of those things he learned about women and was fascinated with women because that's what he saw in his home. And his father, perhaps, did not address that, okay, fully. So that's why we say if we want to keep growing, we've got to address our personal ambition and we've got to address our behavior, because those are things that help us to grow. God wants to grow in our spiritual character. And as we're saying in this series, keep growing. Keep growing. Well, you know what? He's given me the signal. I'm all out of time. But if you have Christ, you're already a winner. If you have the Spirit of the living God, you can face any challenge life throws your way. You can live a victorious life. Be sure to check us out on the website and check out our new newsletter. God bless you.